So once you're in your account, this is the main screen that you'll see. We're going to start by going to the Create button and making a new document. I'm just going to title this CAD Workshop number 2 because it's the second one I taught, but you can do whatever you want. Okay. So first, I want to go through some of the different navigation aspects of OnShape. There are a couple, well, two different ways really that you can navigate. You can have a mouse pad, which most people are going to be using on laptops, or you can use a mouse. And so to start, I want to talk about how you zoom in and zoom out. For your mouse pad, you're just going to hover your cursor over where you want to zoom into and move your fingers downward. So that's how I go in. And then to do the reverse, you're going to move your fingers upwards on the mouse pad. If you have a physical mouse, it is going to be the opposite. So to zoom in, you're going to scroll upwards, and to zoom out, you're going to scroll downwards. If you want to pan across the screen, which is to move it around without really shifting the orientation of the planes, you're going to hit Control, hold that down, right click, and then drag your fingers on your mouse pad across the screen where it is you want to go. It's essentially the same for the mouse. You're going to hold Control, right click, and drag your screen around whichever direction you want to move to. For orbiting, you're going to just right click, whether it's the mouse pad or the mouse, and move your fingers, and this will enable you to rotate the plane view. And you notice right now how it's kind of moving around my screen. It's not necessarily stable. If you want a bit of a better option where you just want it to rotate without moving around in space too, you can use the arrow keys on your keyboard, and it's much more set in space. So take a few more seconds to keep playing around with that. I will note that if you are ever getting into a function as we're getting on that you don't like, a lot of the intuitive like key combinations that we use elsewhere work here. So escape is your friend. If you want to stop doing something, hit escape. If you want to undo what you just did, you can hit Control-Z and it will get rid of that step. So those are just some things to keep in mind as we're going forward. All right, the second navigational thing I want to talk about is the Viewcube, which is what you see me circling my mouse around in the upper right-hand corner. Pretty niftily, you can move this whole icon thing around by left clicking and dragging it across your screen. So if you're working on it and you find it easier for this cube to be in the bottom left-hand corner, you can do precisely that. And essentially, if you want to change any part of your view, all you need to do is click on the Viewcube where you want to be looking at. So I just snapped to the top view. If I click on the upper corner here, I get to see a lot of the planes at once. I can click on the bottom through here, flip around. And you'll also note that there are two long arrows as well as these 4 triangles around the Viewcube. And so basically these 2 bigger arrows, they're going to shift clockwise or counterclockwise the view that you have currently set the orientation for. So they go exactly the direction that you click. If you want to actually rotate the planes, you're going to use the smaller triangles. So this is essentially the more manual way of what your arrow keys were doing earlier. So that's some of the manipulation you can do here. If you want to get back to a basic view, you're like, oh my goodness, I don't like what I'm looking at. This whole cube is frustrating. You can go to the smaller cube underneath it and click, and there are 3 view options here. Trimetric is what the default setting is. But if you have a preference, the other 2 are perfectly fine as well, dimetric or isometric. But that's a pretty easy way to get back to a set view that you can know. Some other things that are pretty helpful under this smaller cube are the zoom to window. So if I click on this, you'll notice my cursor turns into a little magnifying glass with a plus sign in it. So if I want to zoom in right here, I'm going to left click and create a little box, and it's going to automatically make my window what I just decided to scroll to. So that's something that can be helpful. You can also simply hit zoom to fit, and it'll make sure that whatever project you're working on, everything is going to fit in your workspace. Okay, everyone good so far? I can get thumbs up check real fast, that'd be cool. Right, I see a few. All right. If anyone has any questions, definitely remember to utilize the chat, but I'm going to keep moving on for now. The other thing we're going to talk about is this features and parts menu. It's on your far left side. This is where your default geometry references are located, as well as your parts. And don't panic, I'm about to just create something really fast so I have something to reference. And then you'll notice something appear. Cool. Okay. So default geometry, we're talking about the origin and the 3 planes that immediately come set up. If you don't want to look at them anymore, they're bothering you, you can hover over it and you'll notice an eye icon appear. All you have to do is click on it, and now there's no more dot. And you'll know this by 2 ways. To start, if you hover over, there's a slash through the eye, but also you'll notice that the text is grayed out relative to what else is there. And to undo it, you simply click it back and it appears. And this is something that you can do with the parts that will accumulate down here. You see, now I no longer have my little rectangular box, and my sketch already is hidden. So I can make that visible and make my part invisible. So something else that you can do is if you want to see what it looks like 1 step back or further up before you make certain actions, this is what we call the rollback bar. This gray thing right here. You can simply move it above different things. So I moved it back before even my first sketch, and now nothing is displayed. So if I move it up 1, you see the sketch appear and the extrude appears and nothing was deleted. It's just showing you, if I took it back a few steps, this is where I'm at. If you wanted to temporarily see what happens if you get rid of something, but you don't want to actually delete it, you can right click and select suppress. So notice, because I suppressed my sketch, that impacted my ability to do the extrude step. So it will show you essentially what is linked together and what you need to look out for. So we will right click again and hit unsuppress. If this features parts menu is not something that you're utilizing and you want more space, you can make it slide to the side by clicking the little list of lines out to the right. Something you want to do before we get too far into things is select our standard units. So if you go to this icon, the 3 lines immediately to the right of OnShape, you're going to want to go to Workspace Units. And we'll probably be working in either centimeters or millimeters. We will definitely not be working in inches. Degrees is the default here. We like that, that's fine. And I haven't played around too much with mass yet, so for the time being, we'll leave that be. But if you wanted to change any of those things, this is where you do it. And to confirm your changes, you're going to select the green check mark. All right, I'm going to delete this little sketch that I made before we get going in the next part. So while I do that, I'll show you how you delete. So to get rid of this, I've clicked and made this square that then made my rectangular prism glow orange. And I will right click on it and select delete. So that got rid of the part. To get rid of the sketch, I will delete sketch 1. And it shows you that I've done those things. So I'll just delete everything over here to make it clean. But that's the basics of navigation. The button for units, Drew, is under the document menu. It's immediately to the right of the OnShape icon in the upper left corner. You're going to go to Workspace Units, and that's where you'll see the options for length, angle, and mass. All right, any more questions before we head into 2D sketching? All right, we look like we are good in person, so unless anything appears in the chat, I'm going to get rid of the planes that I don't want to see and get ready to draw. So to start a sketch, it's pretty easy to spot this giant sketch button in the top left. You're going to click on sketch and it's going to ask you to select a plane. For now, you only have 3 options because we haven't taught you how to draw your own. So I'm just going to pick the top plane. You can choose whichever one you want. And you'll know that it's selected when it's no longer glowing angry orange and it tells you what plane you've picked. So I'm going to hit check here. And that's actually not what I meant to do. So I'm going to hit edit, which is another good thing to note, and change my view so I'm looking at it from the top. So the first thing we're going to look at sketching are rectangles. And for all the basic shapes that I'm about to walk through today, there's going to be really 2 ways to do it. One that involves clicking and one that involves keyboard shortcuts. So I will show you both, and they're both referenced in that Google Doc that is shared with you. And it's entirely your preference as to what you use after you get to see it today. So I guess before I get too far down the way, to make a sketch, if you don't want to hit the button that says sketch, you can also hit Shift+S on your keyboard. I'm not entirely sure what it's going to do from in a different one, but I hit Shift+S just now and it let me make another one. So going back into the edit for sketch 1, we're going to start with rectangles. There's a rectangle icon up here, and the default one is the corner rectangle. So to draw this rectangle, you first know that you're actually in this tool when it glows blue on the toolbar up top. You will click where you want the first corner to be and drag it diagonally where you want the opposite corner to be. And I think I kind of naturally picked the upper left-hand corner as the top corner, but you can also do it the other way if you so desire. And when you've gotten it kind of the shape you want, you release, and it should have some infill color going on. You can also make this same rectangle by hitting G on your keyboard. It's not a very intuitive letter, but that's what they went with. So if I escape from that tool and hit G, it automatically switches to going back to making corner rectangles for me. And it's probably harder to see the key stuff that I did, but to get out of it, I've been hitting escape on my keyboard. So that's a reminder for you there. There's another type of rectangle, which we can get to by hitting the arrow next to that icon called the center point rectangle. So when this one is selected, where you click is the center of the rectangle. And how you move your mouse up and down affects the height, and how you move it left and right affects the width or the length. So you can do it the clickable method, or you can hit R on your keyboard and it will take you to the same tool. So make a few rectangles, get to where you're comfortable with the tool, and using escape to get out of it. And then whenever you are done with that, you can either clean up your space by really selecting a bunch of them and deleting them, or we can just add more circles in later. And I'm going to scroll out a little bit to see if I can capture more. Okay. I'm going to check the chat real fast. If you don't see the rectangle on your toolbar, it might be because you are in split screen and your computer is not wide enough. So let me make my screen much smaller really fast and see what happens. So I think there will be a couple of arrow options on the side, and it'll be whatever tool you use last. And if you haven't used any, I suspect it's going to be the line. So you should see a bunch of options in a scroll down spot, but try to maybe divide your screen a little bit more where you can see if it'll appear but that'll apply for future ones that we work through as well. Alrighty, moving on to circles. Again, we identify the circle icon on the toolbar. You click where you want the center to be and you drag outwards and you click again. If you want to take the keyboard shortcut, you can simply hit C. Again, center, drag to the outside, and it clicks. To make a shape that's not as common, aka basically not like a rectangle or a circle, we will use the line tool, which is this diagonal right here. You can keep going essentially forever. So you click where you want your first point to be, and you click again when you want to make another line. So I can make something that looks kind of familiar to all of us, like a trapezoid, or I can kind of just go crazy and make this thing that looks like a really janky constellation maybe. So as long as you make sure that when you are ready to close your figure, you hover over the beginning dot you laid, and you should see an orange square pop up. When that appears, that's when you click again, and you know that you're successful in making a closed shape because it should be grayed out in the center. So you can click that icon like I mentioned, or you can hit L on your keyboard, and that'll get you started. All right, so I'm going to delete a few things on my screen. You do not have to necessarily worry about that right now. I am going to ask if everyone will make a rectangle for me. It doesn't matter what tool you use. Just make a rectangle, make sure you have a circle. And let's also use our line tool to make a vaguely obtuse triangle. How did I delete the shapes? Excellent question. I'll demonstrate with the trapezoid. So you're going to left click and draw a blue box around what you want to delete, and it should highlight in orange what has been selected. You can hit delete on your keyboard and it'll go away. Let me know if that doesn't work. Awesome. Okay, so you've probably noticed as we've been making the shapes that some numbers have appeared as we've been dragging things out with the dimensions. So now we're going to learn how to assign the dimensions that we want. So the dimensions tool is this icon up top. It's got arrows on both ends and it's kind of at an angle. You can select it or you can hit D on your keyboard and you know that you will be in dimension mode. Okay, so we're going to start with rectangles. So I'm going to click on this bottom line and you'll notice that immediately a dimension appears. I think it's a good habit to pull it a little bit away from the shape so it's readable. And you'll notice that it immediately is going to assign it the dimension that it happens to be when you created it. And the units that are here right now are my default that I set at the beginning. So you can change your units by typing them in manually. So say I want this to be like 200 millimeters. It just messed everything up. So like don't recommend Control Z. But if you type something in and you want to put it as like inches instead, it'll end up converting it to centimeters. So like, yes, it's right, but it's still ultimately going to default to centimeters. So for now, to change this dimension, if it already exists, you double click on it and this blue box should pop up. So let's just say we're going to make this 4 centimeters. And I've been using Zoom to Fit to get back to where I like it. And so got to get back to the dimension tool. You know it's engaged if the blue box has appeared. We're going to also assign the width. We're just going to keep things pretty simple and make it 2 centimeters. And you'll notice if I try to define this other side, eventually this will probably tell me you have overdefined this. This is unnecessary. But for whatever reason, it hasn't done that yet. So I guess what I'm trying to say is if you define for a rectangle, its width one place, you don't have to do it on all sides. It should be working. Okay, so that's rectangles. If you wanted to do a different way using the keyboard cut, For circles, you can only do diameter. So hover your mouse above the circle until it turns orange and click. Now hit D on your keyboard and click again. And now you should see an option for the dimension. So we'll just set this one to 3. And if I don't type in any dimension, like any units, it'll automatically do the default. Okay, I know that that last one maybe wasn't the most clear. So I'm gonna stop and do a check to see if you can give me a thumbs up if you're doing okay with this part, or if you want me to do a few more shapes. Sure. I'm gonna do another circle from request. So hitting C on my keyboard after I hit escape. To do this circle, I'll make 2 of them to show you both ways. So for this first one, I click on the icon, it's highlighted blue, so I know it's working. I hover over the circle until it turns orange, and then immediately I see a little arrow appear, and I'll just make this one 1. Okay, why not? If you wanted to use the keyboard shortcut, you'll hit D on your keyboard. That engaged this icon where it glowed blue again, and I will click on the circle at that point, and I will also make this one 1. See some chats appear. Let's see. I am not exactly sure what your specific problem is, but again, with the dimension thing, it might be an issue of the size of your screen. So it might be over here. It could be in one of these other different boxes. But again, like Jacob said, you might want to check that you're in sketch mode. So for now, I can tell you, even if you don't see the icon, you should be able to hit D on your keyboard. And if it's not working for you, you might be in another tool right now. So click on the screen, hit the escape key, and then try again. But Jacob and Andre will monitor that. Okay, so that was kind of like sides type of dimensions. We can also mess around with angles. So for that, activate your dimension tool however you have found you preferred so far. We're going to go to our obtuse triangle. We're going to look specifically at the angle that's greater than 90 degrees. So click on one side. You'll notice that it starts to want to make it a dimension. Do not click again. You're going to go to the other side of the triangle that would make up the angle. And this is the point where you click. And you'll notice that now I have this curved arrow and I see degrees. So same ordeal before, where the box immediately shows you what it is without you having set anything. I'm going to make mine 115 and hit enter. If I don't like it, I can double click on it and say, why don't I just make that 80 degrees? And you'll notice that it automatically made some adjustments elsewhere. If I wanted to do the other sides here, let's just say we'll go for 40. I think this is the one where it'll get me. If I try to define it again and make it bigger, it'll say, that's not what a triangle looks like. You've exceeded 180 degrees. So at this point, I'll hit Control-Z. Everything will not grow angrily red again, and we'll be good. And you can also move these around so they're a bit easier to read. Alrighty. I know degrees can sometimes be tricky. So let us know if you have any issues in the chat, but I'll do another quick thumb check, like where we're doing, if you can give me a thumbs up if you're good, or raise a hand, whatever works better for you. See 1 thumbs up. So you can also just let us know if you want more time to play around with this. Yeah, I can show you how to get to the degree dimension. So the degree dimension is the exact same tool that we were using for the sides. The difference here is that, let me delete this so I can do this again real fast. When you click the first side, if I was going to make this a side, I would click again, but I want to look at the angle. So instead, I'm going to move to the other side that makes up the angle so that it's glowing orange. When I click at that point, I've essentially selected two sides, and OnShape knows that I want to talk about the angle between them. So there should be 3 clicks altogether, 2 sides, and 1 to confirm that, yes, this is the angle that I'm looking at. And then it'll show you what it automatically is based on what you drew it to be. And you can change it by typing in it, or you can leave it be and hit enter. Does that make sense? Cool. Alrighty. We're gonna look at the mirroring tool next. So I'm going to delete my circles, and I don't really necessarily care what your screen looks like. I just need you to have a rectangle and your triangle somewhat near to each other. Okay. So for the rectangle, not for the rectangle, for the mirror tool, we're going to be looking at this icon here, which looks like an L that's been flipped over an axis. So when you click on it, it's going to give us some step-by-step instructions, such as select a mirror line. Well, we don't have a line right now, so hit escape and we'll create one. Use your line tool and draw a line to the side of both of your rectangle and your triangle. So you'll just do 2 clicks and hit escape after you make that second click, and it'll take you out and just leave it with a single line. So once you've made this line, we're going to use the construction tool, which is this icon. You'll notice there's a straight line on one side and a dotted line on the other with 2 arrows between them. So you can either click on this and select the line, or you can hit Q on your keyboard, and it should also let you select a line. I think I did this one wrong again, though. All right, scrap that. You're going to delete that line. Get into the construction mode first, and then make your line. There you go. And now it should be dotted as you draw it. So I'm sorry about that one. One of these days I'll remember the order. Okay. Now that we have our line, when it tells us to select our mirror line, this is the line that we choose. At this point, it asks us what we want to have flipped over the line. And I wanted you to keep the rectangle and the triangle to show you, if you hover over these things, you're gonna have to click line by line for some of them. So the ones that are selected are only coming one by one. If I wanted to take a moment and add a rectangle drawn with corners like this, I think it's sometimes different. So if I go back to the mirror tool, yeah, no, it's still doing the same. So just be careful when you're using it to make sure that you've selected all of them and you have a great shape on both sides if that is your goal. But you can also not worry about that if that's not what you need. Okay. Something else that you might want to note is if you ever delete something that's been mirrored, it's not going to impact the other side for whatever reason. But now you don't have a shape on this side. All right. So that is the mirroring tool. I think my screen share just got a little bit weird. Can everyone still see it all right? Okay. I think it dragged my box around. Okay. All right. So one of the last things we want to look at is trimming a tool. So you saw that I was kind of just clicking on a line and deleting it. Something else that can be helpful to use is this trim tool. It looks like a pair of scissors. So mine's currently in the drop-down menu, but yours might be across the top of your toolbar. So you can select that, or you can hit M on your keyboard, and whenever you hover over something, it gets rid of it. So that's how you can take away some things pretty quickly. And I'll just hit escape when I've had my fun with deleting things. So finally, you need to finish a sketch. So whenever you've done all that you want to do, you can hit the green check mark, and that is its own entity. You can right click on the sketch number 1 and rename it. So I can just name this one lines if I wanted to. But if you want to go back and change it, that's totally doable. You just go into edit mode, and now you can make the changes you need to make. So that's really what I had planned today. Something else that is just probably helpful to know is that if you're not really sure what one of these tools up top is for, if you hover over it, it'll give you a little bit of a name. And if it has a keyboard shortcut, this is where it will tell you. So this was kind of just a brief introduction this week. The next 2 workshops are going to be focused on building things in 3D and doing some importing. So if you have any questions related to what we talked about today, we'll definitely answer those. But we will kind of be building on our knowledge over the next 2 weeks. So if you don't think it really relates to the topic today, we'll potentially or probably be covering it in the future. So we'll just kind of monitor the time there. So if anyone wants me to demonstrate anything again, now would be a good time to ask about that in the chat or in person. But besides that, that's all I had for you guys tonight. And make sure that you've made your own copy of the Google Doc. So I want that to be something you can utilize later if you need it.